The silence in the small white church was so complete that Adelaide Morgan could hear the prairie wind whistling through the cracks in the walls, and that was when she knew Thomas was not coming back. She stood at the altar in her mother's wedding dress, cream-colored silk that had been carefully preserved for this moment, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers that her younger sister had picked that morning near their homestead outside Twin Falls, Idaho Territory. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, creating golden rectangles on the wooden floor where dust motes danced in oblivion to her humiliation. Behind her, she could feel the weight of 60 pairs of eyes, some pitying, some curious, all waiting to see what she would do next. Reverend Thompson cleared his throat for the third time in as many minutes, his Bible still open to the page he had been ready to read from 20 minutes ago, when the ceremony should have begun. Adelaide's father, Marcus, stood rigid beside her, his weathered face growing redder with each passing moment, though whether from anger or shame she could not tell. Her mother sat in the front pew, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, while her two younger sisters tried not to stare at her with wide, frightened eyes. Adelaide had known Thomas Whitfield for 2 years, ever since he had arrived in Twin Falls with ambitious plans to expand his father's cattle operation from Wyoming into Idaho Territory. He was handsome in a polished way that seemed out of place in their rough frontier town, with dark hair always neatly combed and clothes that looked like they had been ordered from a San Francisco catalog. He had courted her with flowers and pretty words, painted pictures of the grand house he would build for them, the life of comfort she would have as his wife. At 22, Adelaide had been considered nearly a spinster by some of the town gossips, most girls in Twin Falls married by 19 or 20. She had been helping her father run their general store and had been content enough with her life, but Thomas's attention had been flattering, his promises seductive. The church door creaked open, and Adelaide's heart leaped for one desperate moment before she saw it was only Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife, slipping out with an embarrassed glance in her direction. The door closed again with a hollow thud that seemed to echo the closing of all Adelaide's hopes and dreams. "Adelaide," Reverend Thompson said softly, finally closing his Bible. "Perhaps we should acknowledge that Mr. Whitfield is not going to arrive." The words hit her like a physical blow, even though she had known their truth for the past 10 minutes. She nodded slowly, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Her father's hand came to rest on her shoulder, heavy and warm, the only comfort he knew how to offer. "Folks," Marcus Morgan's voice rang out across the church, steady despite the circumstances, "I reckon it is clear there will be no wedding today. I thank you all for coming, and I would appreciate your discretion regarding this matter. Adelaide is my daughter, and I will not have her made into a spectacle for idle gossip." The congregation began to murmur and move, the sound of boots on wood and rustling skirts filling the silence. Adelaide stood frozen, watching people file past her, some offering sympathetic touches or whispered condolences, others simply averting their eyes. She felt like she was watching it all happen from a great distance, as though her soul had separated from her body and was floating somewhere near the rafters, looking down at the pitiful figure in the wedding dress. Her mother came to her side, taking the bouquet from her clenched fingers. "Come, sweetheart, let us go home." But Adelaide could not move. She was thinking of the hotel room she and Thomas were supposed to share tonight, the wedding supper that was probably already laid out at the restaurant, the carefully packed trunk at home full of her things ready to move to Thomas's ranch. She was thinking of the kisses they had shared in the shadows of her father's store, the promises he had whispered, the way he had held her hand, and told her she was the most beautiful woman in Idaho Territory. "Did you know?" Adelaide heard herself ask her father. "Did you know he would do this?" Marcus's jaw worked, his blue eyes troubled. "I had concerns about the man's character, I told you that, but I did not think him capable of this level of cowardice." Someone had stayed behind in the church, Adelaide realized. She could feel a presence, hear the soft tread of boots on the wooden floor approaching from the back. She turned, half hoping against hope that it was Thomas, that he had some explanation, some reason that would make sense of this nightmare. Instead, she found herself looking at Samuel Vance, one of the ranch hands who worked for the McCready outfit north of town. She knew him by sight, had seen him in her father's store buying supplies, had exchanged perhaps a dozen words with him over the past year. He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark blonde hair that always seemed to need cutting, wearing dusty trail clothes and boots that had seen hard use. He held his hat in his hands, turning it slowly as he approached, his gray eyes serious. "Pardon the intrusion, Miss Morgan," he said quietly. "But I thought you should know that I saw Thomas Whitfield this morning at the train station." Adelaide's mother gasped, but Adelaide just stared at him, waiting for him to continue. He was boarding the eastbound train with his belongings. He had a woman with him, a blonde lady in a fancy green dress. I heard him call her Caroline. They were laughing together, looked mighty familiar with each other. Samuel's voice was gentle but factual. "I thought about coming to tell you then, but the train was already pulling out, and I figured it would just cause a scene if I interrupted the ceremony on a maybe. But when I got here and saw what was happening, I thought you deserved to know it was not anything you did or did not do. This was his choice, his failing, not yours." The words penetrated the fog surrounding Adelaide's mind slowly. Thomas had not been delayed. He had not had an accident. He had deliberately left, had been planning to leave, probably for days or weeks. He had let her stand here, let her family and friends gather, let her put on this dress and these hopes, knowing he would not come. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. "Caroline," Adelaide repeated numbly. "From Wyoming. He told me she was just a friend of the family." Samuel nodded. "I am sorry, Miss Morgan. No woman deserves to be treated this way. But I thought the truth, as hard as it is, might be better than wondering." "Thank you, Mr. Vance," Marcus said gruffly. "It took courage to tell us, and I appreciate your honesty." Samuel looked at Adelaide again, and there was something in his eyes that she could not quite identify. Compassion, certainly, but something else too. "His loss is my blessing," he said quietly. "Because now I can tell you what I have been wanting to say for 6 months, but could not because you were spoken for. You are the kindest, most capable woman I have ever known, Adelaide Morgan. I have watched you handle difficult customers with patience, seen you give credit to families who needed it, noticed the way you help your father run that store like it is your own. You deserve better than Thomas Whitfield. You deserve a man who would crawl through broken glass to get to you, who would count himself the luckiest fool in the territory, just to have you look his way." Adelaide stared at him, shock warring with something else, something that felt like a tiny spark of warmth in the frozen wasteland of her humiliation. Before she could respond, Samuel nodded to her parents and walked back down the aisle and out of the church, leaving her standing there with his words echoing in her mind. "Well," her mother said after a moment, "that was unexpected." Adelaide's father made a thoughtful sound. "Samuel Vance is a good man. Works hard, saves his money, does not drink to excess or gamble. Been working for McCready for 3 years now, and I hear he is one of their best hands, planning to buy his own land soon." "Father," Adelaide said, finding her voice at last, "can we please just go home?" The ride back to the Morgan homestead passed in a blur. Adelaide sat in the wagon between her two younger sisters, Emma, who was 17, and Charlotte, who was 15, while her parents sat up front. No one spoke. The prairie stretched out endlessly on all sides, golden grass rippling in the wind beneath the huge sky. Normally, Adelaide loved this landscape, the vast openness of it, the way it made her feel small but free. Today, it just felt empty. Their house was a sturdy two-story structure that her father had built when they first claimed their land 10 years ago. It sat beside the road leading into Twin Falls, strategically placed for the store that occupied the first floor. The family lived upstairs in comfortable rooms that her mother had made homey with curtains and rugs, and the furniture they had hauled in their wagon, all the way from Missouri. Adelaide went straight to her room when they arrived, but she could not bear to look at the trunk packed for her new life. So she went back downstairs to the store, still wearing her wedding dress. The store was closed for the day, shutters drawn, but enough light came through the cracks for her to see the familiar shelves stocked with goods, the counter where she spent most of her days, the account books she helped her father maintain. She was sitting behind the counter, staring at nothing, when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Her father appeared carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey. "Thought you might need this," he said, pouring generous measures into both glasses and sliding one across the counter to her. Adelaide picked it up and drank it in one swallow, coughing as it burned down her throat. Marcus refilled her glass without comment. "I am sorry, Papa," she said quietly, "for the embarrassment, the expense, everything." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Marcus said firmly. "That boy made a fool of himself, not you. Anyone who would do what he did is not worth a second of your grief, Adelaide. I know that does not help how you feel right now, but it is the truth." "I thought I loved him," Adelaide admitted. "But now I keep thinking about it and I realize I loved the idea of him, the promises he made, the life he described. I do not think I actually knew him at all. What does that say about me?" Her father was quiet for a moment, sipping his whiskey. "It says you are human. Says you are at an age where settling down seems important, and you thought you found someone to do that with. It also says Thomas Whitfield is a skilled liar. That is not your failing, daughter. That is his." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the shadows lengthen across the store floor. "What did you think of what Samuel Vance said?" Adelaide asked finally. "I think he has been carrying a torch for you longer than 6 months," Marcus replied. "I have seen the way he looks at you when he comes in here, like you hung the moon. But he is a respectful man, so he kept his distance when he saw you were courting Thomas." Adelaide thought about Samuel's gray eyes, the gentleness in them when he had delivered his devastating news, the conviction in his voice when he had spoken about what she deserved. She had never really looked at him before, had seen him as just another customer, just another cowboy passing through her life in a town full of them. But there had been something different about him today, something that had reached through her shock and touched a part of her she thought had died standing at that altar. "I am not ready to think about any man right now," she said firmly. "I just want to forget this whole terrible day." But forgetting proved impossible. The next morning, when Adelaide came downstairs to help open the store, she found her mother had been up early baking. The kitchen table was covered with pies, cakes, and cookies. "Mother, what is all this?" "Food for the heart and food for the soul," her mother, Catherine, replied. "We paid for a wedding supper that will not be eaten. I had the restaurant pack it up and bring it here. We will take it to the church to distribute to families who need it, and I am baking because it helps me think. Also because I am angry and needing dough is better than throwing things." Despite herself, Adelaide felt a smile tug at her lips. "Can I help?" They spent the morning baking together, not talking much, but finding comfort in the familiar ritual. When customers started arriving at the store, Adelaide took a deep breath and went down to help her father. She held her head high as she measured out flour and sugar, cut fabric from bolts, rang up purchases on the cash register. The customers were kind, mostly. A few offered condolences. Some pretended nothing had happened. Only Mrs. Henderson, a sour-faced woman who always complained about prices, made a snide comment about Adelaide being too particular, and Marcus immediately asked her to take her business elsewhere. Samuel Vance came in around noon, and Adelaide felt her heart skip in a way that was entirely unexpected and unwelcome. He approached the counter with his hat in his hands again, looking uncertain. "Miss Morgan," he said quietly, "I want to apologize if I spoke out of turn yesterday. It was not the right time or place, and I should have kept my feelings to myself. I just could not stand by and watch you wondering what you had done wrong when the fault was entirely his." Adelaide studied him for a moment. In the bright daylight filtering through the store windows, she could see details she had never noticed before. The laugh lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he smiled often. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The way his hands, work roughened and strong, handled his hat with surprising gentleness. "You do not need to apologize, Mr. Vance," she said. "Your honesty was a kindness even if it hurt to hear, and your other words, well, they were a comfort in a moment when I had none." "Samuel," he said. "Please call me Samuel. Mr. Vance makes me feel like you are talking to my father." "Samuel, then, and you should call me Adelaide." He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and more handsome than she had realized. "Adelaide, that is a beautiful name, suits you." "What can I help you with today?" she asked, trying to keep things businesslike even as something warm unfurled in her chest. "I need supplies for a cattle drive we are starting next week. Got a list here." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her. "We will be gone about 3 weeks, taking a herd down to Boise to sell." Adelaide read through the list, making mental calculations. "This will take me a bit to gather everything. Can you come back in an hour?" "I can wait," Samuel said, "if that is all right. I do not have anything pressing back at the ranch." So he waited, sitting on the bench by the door that her father kept for older customers, watching as Adelaide moved efficiently around the store pulling items from shelves. Her father was in the back doing inventory, so they were essentially alone except for the occasional customer who came and went. "How long have you been in Twin Falls?" Adelaide asked as she measured out coffee beans. "About 14 months now. I came down from Montana, was working on a ranch up there but wanted to see more of the territory. Heard McCready was a fair boss who treated his men well, so I signed on. Been a good decision. Idaho is beautiful country." "Where are you from originally?" "Nebraska. My parents had a small farm outside Omaha. They both died of influenza when I was 16, lost my younger brother too. I worked neighboring farms for a few years, but there were too many memories there. Decided to head west and start fresh." "I am sorry about your family," Adelaide said softly. "That must have been terrible." "It was a long time ago," Samuel said, though his eyes suggested the pain was not as distant as his words implied. "But it taught me not to take time for granted. When you care about someone, you should tell them. You should show them every day, because you never know how many days you will have." Adelaide set down the sack of flour she was holding and turned to face him fully. "Is that why you spoke yesterday? Because of not taking time for granted?" "Partly," Samuel admitted. "But also because watching you stand there in that church, looking so hurt and confused, I could not bear it. I have been watching you for months, Adelaide, learning who you are through your actions. You are kind to everyone who walks through that door. You are patient with children and respectful to elders. I have seen you extend credit to families going through hard times without being asked. I have watched you manage this store like you were born to it, handling the accounts and the inventory with a skill that would put most men to shame. And you do it all with grace and good humor. When I saw Thomas Whitfield courting you, I thought he was the luckiest man alive. When he didn't show up yesterday, I thought he was the biggest fool in the territory. Adelaide felt heat rising in her cheeks. You barely know me, Samuel. I know enough, he said quietly. And I would like to know more if you would let me. When you are ready. I am not asking for anything right now except the chance to be your friend, to prove that not all men are like Thomas Whitfield. Some of us keep our promises. Before Adelaide could respond, the door opened, and a group of women entered. Friends of her mother's coming to express their sympathy and undoubtedly gather whatever gossip they could. Adelaide excused herself to finish gathering Samuel's supplies, her mind whirling with confusion and something that felt dangerously like hope. By the time she had everything packed and tallied, the women had left and her father had returned from the back room. Samuel paid for his supplies in cash, counted out carefully from a worn leather wallet. "Thank you, Adelaide," he said as he gathered up his parcels. "I will be back when we return from the drive. 3 weeks, maybe a little less if the weather holds." "Travel safe," she heard herself say. After he left, her father gave her a knowing look but said nothing. Adelaide busied herself straightening the shelves he had disarranged, trying not to think about the fact that she would not see Samuel for 3 weeks, trying not to care that his absence bothered her. The days settled into a routine. Adelaide worked in the store, helped her mother with the housework, tried to ignore the pitying looks and whispered gossip that still followed her around town. A letter arrived from Thomas's father in Wyoming, apologizing for his son's behavior and enclosing a check to cover the wedding expenses. The money felt like an insult, but her father deposited it pragmatically, saying they might as well get something out of the disaster. Adelaide found herself thinking about Samuel more than she wanted to admit. His words echoed in her mind during quiet moments. She would remember the gentleness in his eyes, the conviction in his voice when he had called Thomas's abandonment a blessing because it freed her. She tried to tell herself she was being foolish, transferring her feelings from one man to another out of hurt and vulnerability. But deep down she knew it was different. What she felt when she thought about Samuel was not the same as what she had felt with Thomas. With Thomas, it had been excitement about the future he promised, the status of being his wife, the escape from spinsterhood. With Samuel, it was something quieter but deeper, a sense of recognition, of safety, of genuine interest in who he was as a person. 2 weeks passed. Adelaide was helping a customer select fabric when the door opened, and Sarah McCready came in, the wife of Samuel's employer. She was a kind woman in her 40s who Adelaide had always liked. "Adelaide, dear," Sarah said warmly. "How are you holding up?" "I am well, Mrs. McCready. Thank you for asking. I wanted to let you know that our boys should be back from the drive tomorrow or the next day. They made good time and got excellent prices in Boise. My husband is very pleased." Sarah paused, then added with a gentle smile, "Samuel asked about you in his last telegram. Wanted to know if I had seen you in town, if you were doing all right." Adelaide felt warmth spread through her chest. That was kind of him. "He is a good man, Adelaide, one of the best we have ever employed. Honest, hardworking, has a good head on his shoulders. My husband is trying to convince him to stay on permanently, maybe work toward becoming foreman eventually." Sarah's eyes were knowing. "He is planning to file a homestead claim soon, start building his own place. A man like that would make a good husband for the right woman." Adelaide knew exactly what Sarah was doing, and ordinarily she might have resented the matchmaking. But something about Sarah's straightforward kindness made it feel less like manipulation and more like genuine concern. "I barely know him, Mrs. Macready." "Then get to know him," Sarah said simply. "What harm could it do? If nothing comes of it, at least you have made a friend. But Adelaide, not every man is like Thomas Whitfield. Some men are worth the risk of trusting again." After Sarah left, Adelaide could not concentrate on her work. She kept watching the door, half hoping Samuel would walk through it, even though she knew he was still a day or two away. She felt foolish and young and uncertain, but underneath all that was a current of excitement she had not felt in weeks. He came back on a Tuesday afternoon, looking trail-worn and dusty but smiling as he walked into the store. Adelaide was alone, her father having gone to the bank. Her heart did something complicated in her chest when she saw him. "Welcome back," she said, hoping her voice sounded normal. "How was the drive?" "Long but successful. Got good prices, no major problems with the herd. I am glad to be back, though." He paused, turning his hat in his hands in that gesture she was starting to recognize. "I was wondering, Adelaide, if you might like to take a walk with me sometime. Maybe Sunday after church. I know a spot by the river that is real pretty this time of year. We could talk, get to know each other properly. If you are interested, I mean. No pressure if you are not ready." Adelaide knew she should probably say no. It had only been 3 weeks since the wedding disaster. People would talk, but looking at Samuel's honest, hopeful face, she found herself not caring what people would say. "I would like that," she said softly. "Sunday after church sounds nice." The smile that broke across Samuel's face was like sunrise. "Really? That is wonderful. I will come by your house around 2 if that suits you." "That suits me perfectly." Sunday dawned clear and beautiful, the September air crisp with the promise of autumn. Adelaide dressed carefully in a simple blue dress that brought out the green in her hazel eyes, telling herself she was not being vain, just wanting to look presentable. Her sisters watched with barely concealed excitement as she pinned up her auburn hair. "You like him," Emma said with certainty. "I barely know him," Adelaide protested, but even she could hear how unconvincing she sounded. "You never looked at Thomas the way you look when you talk about Samuel," Charlotte observed. "With Thomas you always seemed like you were trying to be what he wanted. With Samuel you just seem like yourself." Adelaide was still thinking about her sister's words as she sat through the church service, very aware of Samuel sitting 3 rows behind her with some of the other Macready Ranch hands. When the service ended and people filed out into the bright sunshine, he was waiting for her by the church steps. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. Adelaide took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through his clean Sunday shirt. They walked through town, drawing a few curious looks but fewer than she had expected. Maybe people were finally moving on from her scandal, or maybe they just approved of Samuel more than they had of Thomas. The spot he took her to was about a mile from town, where the Snake River curved through a meadow dotted with late-blooming wildflowers. Someone had placed a large flat rock near the water's edge, perfect for sitting. Samuel helped her settle on it before sitting beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "This is beautiful," Adelaide said, watching the sunlight dance on the water. "How did you find it?" "I ride out this way sometimes when I need to think." There is something peaceful about moving water, makes your problems seem smaller somehow. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments before Samuel spoke again. "I want to tell you about myself, if you are willing to listen. Not to brag or impress you, just so you know who I am." "I would like that." So he talked, and Adelaide listened. He told her about growing up on the farm in Nebraska, about parents who had loved each other deeply and taught him what a good marriage looked like. He talked about losing them and his brother, about the grief that had driven him west. He described the ranches he had worked, the skills he had learned, the money he had carefully saved. He told her about his dream of having his own place someday, not a huge operation but something manageable that he could build with his own hands. "I am 26 years old," Samuel said. "I have been saving for almost 10 years now, living simple and putting away most of what I earn. I have enough to file a homestead claim and build a small house, buy a starter herd. McCready has offered to sell me some breeding stock at a fair price and give me good terms. I could start next spring if I wanted to." "Why haven't you?" Adelaide asked. Samuel looked at her, his gray eyes serious. "Because I did not want to build a life alone. I have been waiting to meet someone I could imagine sharing it with. Someone who would be a true partner, not just a wife in name. Someone strong and capable who could handle the hard times as well as the good ones." Adelaide's breath caught. "And you think I am that person? You don't really know me, Samuel." "Then tell me about yourself," he said simply. "Help me know you." So Adelaide talked, surprised by how easy it was to open up to him. She told him about growing up helping in her father's store, about the education her mother had insisted on even though many people thought it unnecessary for girls. She talked about her love of reading, her head for numbers, her satisfaction in the daily work of running the business. She admitted her fear of ending up alone, her mistake in thinking Thomas was her only chance at marriage. "I thought I had to accept what was offered because I was getting too old," she confessed. "I thought Thomas was my last opportunity to have a family of my own. That is partly why I ignored the little doubts I had about him. I talked myself into believing it was right because I was afraid of the alternative." 22 is not old," Samuel said firmly. "And settling for someone who does not deserve you is worse than being alone, though you are not alone, Adelaide. You have your family, and now you have me if you want me. Not as a husband, at least not yet, but as a friend. As someone who sees your worth and wants to spend time with you without expecting anything in return except your company." Something hard and tight that had been lodged in Adelaide's chest since the wedding disaster began to loosen. "I would like that very much." They talked until the sun began to sink toward the horizon, sharing stories and dreams, discovering shared values and interests. Adelaide learned that Samuel loved to read but rarely had access to books, that he had taught himself to play the harmonica during long nights watching cattle, that he believed in treating people fairly regardless of their station in life. Samuel learned that Adelaide wanted to travel someday, that she helped her mother teach reading to the younger children in town, that she had a sharp wit hidden beneath her gentle demeanor. When Samuel finally walked her home, Adelaide felt lighter than she had in months. At her door, he took her hand and held it gently. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Maybe next Sunday, or sooner if you would like. I could come by the store, we could take a shorter walk after you finish work one day." "I would like that," Adelaide said, then made a decision. "Why do not you come to Sunday dinner? My mother always makes too much food and I think she would like to meet you properly. So would my father." Samuel's face lit up. "I would be honored." That week passed in a pleasant blur. Samuel came by the store twice, once for supplies he probably did not really need and once just to walk Adelaide home after work. Each time they talked more, learned more about each other, and Adelaide felt the foundation of something real and solid building between them. When Sunday came, Samuel arrived at the Morgan home exactly on time, wearing his best clothes and carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers for Catherine, and a book for Marcus that he had borrowed from McCready's small library. The gesture clearly pleased Adelaide's parents, and dinner was relaxed and pleasant. Marcus questioned Samuel about his plans and prospects, but in a way that felt protective rather than judgmental. Catherine watched them interact with knowing eyes, and Adelaide's sisters were on their best behavior, curious about this man their sister was seeing. After dinner, Samuel helped clear the table without being asked, then offered to help Marcus with some repairs on the store's front steps. Adelaide watched through the window as the two men worked together, her father gradually relaxing as he took Samuel's measure. When they came back inside, Marcus pulled Adelaide aside. "He is a good man," her father said quietly. "Honest, hardworking, respectful, nothing like Whitfield. If you want to see where this goes, you have my blessing." "It is still early, Papa. We have only spent a few days together." "I knew I wanted to marry your mother after 3 days," Marcus said with a smile. "When you know, but you are right to take your time. Just do not let fear keep you from something good." Over the following weeks, Adelaide and Samuel fell into a pattern. He came to Sunday dinner every week. He walked her home from the store several evenings a week. They went on long rides on his days off, him on his horse and her on her father's mare, exploring the countryside around Twin Falls. With each passing day, Adelaide felt herself falling for him in a way that was completely different from what she had experienced with Thomas. This was not infatuation or desperation or excitement about a promised future. This was genuine affection and respect, growing deeper with every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of comfortable silence. Samuel was everything Thomas had not been. He was steady and present, showing up when he said he would, doing what he promised. He listened when she talked and remembered details she mentioned. He treated her like an equal, asking her opinions and genuinely valuing her thoughts. He never tried to change her or make her feel like she needed to be different to please him. Most importantly, he never made her feel like she was lucky he was interested in her. Instead, he made it clear through words and actions that he felt lucky she was giving him a chance. One evening in late October, they were sitting on the porch of the Morgan house watching the sunset when Samuel took her hand. "Adelaide, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. "I have fallen in love with you. I know it has only been a couple of months and you might think it is too soon, but I am certain of my feelings. You are everything I have been looking for and more than I ever hoped to find. You are kind and strong and smart and beautiful. You make me laugh. You challenge me to be better. When I think about my future now, I cannot imagine it without you in it." Adelaide's heart was pounding. "Samuel, I need to be honest with you. I care about you deeply, more than I have ever cared about anyone, but I am scared. Thomas hurt me badly, and I keep waiting for something to go wrong with us, for you to turn out to be different than I think you are." "I understand that fear," Samuel said gently, "and I do not expect you to just trust me blindly. I am willing to prove myself to you for as long as it takes. But Adelaide, I need you to know my intentions are serious. I am not passing time with you. I am courting you because I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to file that homestead claim and build a house that you helped design. Start a ranch we run together. Have children we raise together. I want 50 years of Sunday dinners and evening talks and working side by side. I want all of it, but only with you." Tears were streaming down Adelaide's face. "I think I am falling in love with you too. It scares me how much I care about you already. But I also know what I feel for you is real in a way that what I felt for Thomas never was. I just need a little more time to be sure, to let go of the fear." "Take all the time you need," Samuel said, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "I am not going anywhere." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Adelaide felt something inside her click into place like a key turning in a lock. This was right. This was real. This was what love was supposed to feel like. The weeks turned into months. Samuel filed his homestead claim on 160 acres about 5 miles north of Twin Falls, good land with water access and grazing for cattle. He spent his days working for Macready, and his evenings and days off working on his own land, building a small cabin to establish his claim. Adelaide visited the site with him often, offering suggestions on the layout, helping him plan where things should go. It felt natural to talk about the future now, about the life they would build together. In December, Samuel came to Sunday dinner carrying a small wooden box that he had clearly made himself. After the meal, with Adelaide's family gathered around, he got down on one knee in front of her. "Adelaide Morgan, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You are my best friend and my greatest blessing. I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice in giving me a chance. I will never take you for granted. I will never make you doubt my love or my commitment. I will be your partner in all things for as long as we both live. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not fancy or expensive, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Adelaide looked at Samuel's hopeful face, at the love shining in his gray eyes, and felt absolute certainty wash over her. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, Samuel, I will marry you." The joy on his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger was something she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. Her family erupted in congratulations, her mother crying happy tears, her father shaking Samuel's hand with genuine warmth, her sisters squealing with excitement. They set the wedding date for April, giving Samuel time to finish the cabin and Adelaide time to prepare without feeling rushed. This time, Adelaide was not worried or afraid. She was simply happy, looking forward to the future with a man she loved and trusted completely. The winter passed in a flurry of preparation. Adelaide and her mother sewed a new wedding dress, simple but elegant in ivory silk. Samuel worked on the cabin whenever weather permitted, determined to have it finished before the wedding. Adelaide's father helped, and soon other men from town and the Macready ranch were pitching in, the frontier tradition of neighbors helping neighbors. The cabin took shape, small but well built, with windows Samuel had ordered from Boise and a stone fireplace he built with his own hands. In March, Thomas Whitfield came back to Twin Falls. Adelaide was working in the store when he walked in, looking much the same as he had the previous spring. Her heart did not skip. She felt nothing except a mild curiosity about why he had returned. "Hello, Adelaide," Thomas said, his voice uncertain. "I heard you were still in town. I had hoped to speak with you. What can I help you with, Mr. Whitfield?" Adelaide kept her voice professionally neutral. Thomas winced at the formal address. "I wanted to apologize for what I did. It was unforgivable the way I treated you. I was a coward and a fool. Caroline and we did not last. She left me within a month. I have regretted my choices ever since. I thought perhaps there might be a chance we could talk, see if there was any possibility of starting over." Adelaide stared at him, amazed at his audacity. "No, Mr. Whitfield, there is no possibility. I am engaged to be married next month to a man who is worth 10 of you. What you did to me was cruel and humiliating, but it was also the best thing that ever happened to me because it freed me to find real love. So thank you for being a coward and a fool. It led me exactly where I needed to be." The door opened behind Thomas and Samuel walked in. He took in the scene immediately, his eyes going to Adelaide first to make sure she was all right, then to Thomas with a look that was not quite hostile but certainly not friendly. "Everything all right here?" Samuel asked, moving to stand beside Adelaide. "Everything is perfect," Adelaide said, taking Samuel's hand. "Mr. Whitfield was just leaving." Thomas looked between them, seeing the obvious love and connection, and something crumbled in his expression. "I truly am sorry, Adelaide. I hope you will be happy." "I will be," Adelaide said firmly. "But not because you hope it, because I chose the right man this time." After Thomas left, Samuel pulled Adelaide into his arms. "Are you all right?" "I am wonderful," Adelaide said honestly. Seeing him just now, I felt nothing except gratitude that he left me at that altar. Because if he had not, I never would have heard you tell me his loss was your blessing. I never would have given you a chance. I never would have found this happiness. Samuel kissed her forehead. "His loss is my blessing," he repeated. "The truest words I ever spoke." The wedding took place on a bright April morning in the same church where Adelaide had been left waiting the year before. This time, there was no doubt, no anxiety, no fear. Samuel was there an hour early, pacing nervously, checking his pocket watch every few minutes even though he knew Adelaide would not be late. She arrived right on time, radiant in her ivory dress, her face glowing with happiness. Reverend Thompson smiled as they stood before him, clearly pleased to be performing a wedding that would actually happen. Adelaide's hands were steady as she held Samuel's, her voice clear as she spoke her vows. "I, Adelaide Morgan, take you, Samuel Vance, to be my husband. I promise to be your partner in all things, to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to trust you with my heart, which you have treated with such care. I promise to love you today, tomorrow, and for all the days after that." Samuel's voice was thick with emotion as he spoke his vows. "I, Samuel Vance, take you, Adelaide Morgan, to be my wife. I promise to cherish and respect you always. I promise to work beside you to build the life we have dreamed about. I promise to make you laugh, to listen when you need to talk, to be the partner you deserve. I promise to love you with everything I have for as long as I live." When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife and Samuel kissed her, Adelaide felt like her heart might burst with joy. This was right. This was real. This was forever. The wedding celebration was held at the McCready Ranch, Sarah insisting on hosting it as her gift to them. It was a lively affair with food and music and dancing. Adelaide danced with Samuel, with her father, with the ranch hands who had helped build their cabin. She laughed and celebrated, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about their happiness. As the sun began to set, Samuel stole her away from the crowd, leading her to the wagon where their belongings were already loaded. The McCready hands had spent the day moving Adelaide's things to the cabin, and everything was ready for them to start their new life. The cabin glowed with lamplight as they approached it, small but welcoming against the darkening sky. Samuel lifted Adelaide down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up into his arms. "I believe there is a tradition about carrying the bride over the threshold," he said with a grin. Adelaide laughed as he carried her inside, setting her gently on her feet in the main room. It was a simple space but beautifully done. The furniture Samuel had built himself. Curtains her mother had sewn hanging at the windows. A quilt Adelaide had pieced spread across the bed in the corner. It was not much, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and filled with their dreams. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vance," Samuel said softly. "Home," Adelaide repeated, the word feeling right on her tongue. "I like the sound of that." They spent their wedding night learning each other in the gentle lamplight, whispering promises and declarations, building the foundation of their physical relationship with the same care and respect that had characterized their courtship. It was perfect in its imperfection, sweet and awkward and tender, and Adelaide fell asleep in Samuel's arms feeling safe and loved and exactly where she belonged. The first year of their marriage was full of hard work and simple joys. Samuel continued working for McCready while building their own herd slowly, buying a few head of cattle at a time as they could afford it. Adelaide helped with the ranch work, discovering she had a knack for animal husbandry, while also keeping the books and managing their finances. They worked from dawn to dusk most days, fell into bed exhausted most nights, and were happier than either of them had imagined possible. In the autumn, Adelaide realized she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He stared at her for a moment, then let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town, lifting her up and spinning her around despite her laughing protests that he would make her dizzy. "We are having a baby," he kept saying in wonder. "A baby, Adelaide. We are going to be parents." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Samuel was attentive and protective, constantly worrying about Adelaide doing too much work, though she insisted she was healthy and capable. They spent the long winter evenings planning for the baby, Samuel building a cradle from oak wood, Adelaide sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Their son was born on a warm May evening, delivered by the doctor from Twin Falls with Adelaide's mother in attendance. It was a long labor but not a complicated one, and when Samuel was finally allowed into the room to meet his child, the look on his face brought tears to Adelaide's eyes. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one careful finger. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Looking at her husband holding their son with such tender awe, Adelaide knew exactly what the name should be. "Marcus," she said, "after my father, Marcus Samuel Vance." Samuel looked up at her, his eyes bright with tears. "That is perfect. Hello, Marcus. I am your papa and I promise I will do my best by you." Baby Marcus grew healthy and strong, a happy child with his mother's hazel eyes and his father's smile. The ranch prospered too, slowly but steadily. By the time Marcus was 2, they had a respectable herd and Samuel was able to stop working for McCready and focus entirely on their own operation. They added onto the cabin, building a second bedroom and expanding the main room. Adelaide's life was full in a way she had never expected. The work was hard, the hours long, the challenges constant, but she loved it. She loved working beside Samuel, making decisions together, building something lasting. She loved being a mother, watching Marcus grow and learn. She loved the simple rhythms of their life, the morning coffee shared before starting the day's work, the evening meal around their table, the nights falling asleep in Samuel's arms. When Marcus was 3, Adelaide became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder and the birth was difficult. Their daughter came into the world fighting, small but fierce, and Adelaide hemorrhaged badly enough that the doctor warned them there should not be any more children. Samuel, terrified of losing Adelaide, agreed readily. He held his wife and new daughter with tears streaming down his face, grateful beyond words that both had survived. They named their daughter Catherine Rose, after both grandmothers. She had her father's blonde hair and gray eyes, and from the beginning she was a force of nature. Where Marcus was careful and thoughtful, Catherine was bold and adventurous. Samuel joked that she was going to give them gray hair early, but the love in his voice when he said it made it clear he would not change a thing about her. The years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. Marcus started school in Twin Falls, riding in each day on the pony Samuel bought for him. Catherine followed a few years later, though she complained constantly about having to sit still and learn letters when she would rather be outside with the animals. The ranch continued to grow, and they hired their first ranch hand when the kids were 8 and 5. A young man named Peter who reminded Adelaide of Samuel when she had first met him. earnest and hardworking with dreams of his own place someday. Adelaide's father retired from running the store, and to everyone's surprise, Adelaide and Samuel bought it, with Adelaide managing it 3 days a week while Samuel handled the ranch. It made financial sense to diversify their income, and Adelaide had missed the work more than she realized. With the store and the ranch, they were more prosperous than either of them had ever expected to be, not wealthy by any means, but comfortable and secure. On their 10th anniversary, Samuel took Adelaide back to the spot by the river where they had first really talked. Someone had built a more permanent bench there over the years, and they sat on it watching the water flow by, their hands clasped together. "You ever regret it?" Adelaide asked. "The hard work, the struggles, the fact that we do not have an easy life." Samuel turned to her, genuine confusion on his face. "Regret? Adelaide, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Every single day with you has been a gift, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones because we faced them together. I would not trade our life for anything. Not even for an easier one. With more money, less work. Not even then," Samuel said firmly. "Because all those things you mentioned, the hard work and struggles, we built something real through them. We built this life with our own hands. Our children are growing up strong and capable because they see us working hard. We have respect in this community because we earned it, and most importantly, we have each other. Thomas Whitfield could have given you money and status, but could he have given you partnership, respect? A love that grows deeper every year? I do not think so, and I know for certain I could never have had with anyone else what I have with you." Adelaide kissed him, putting 10 years of love and gratitude into it. "His loss truly was your blessing." "Our blessing," Samuel corrected. "Because you got me too, and I am a pretty good deal if I do say so myself." Adelaide laughed, the sound carrying across the meadow. "Yes, you are, the very best deal I ever made." When Marcus turned 16, he announced that he wanted to go to agricultural college in Boise, learn modern ranching techniques to bring back to the family operation. Samuel was proud but also a bit sad to see his son growing up and looking toward a future beyond their ranch. Catherine, at 13, declared that she was going to be a veterinarian, shocking everyone since women doctors of any kind were rare. But absolutely no one doubted she would find a way to achieve her goal. Adelaide and Samuel stood on their porch one evening watching the sunset, their children's voices floating from inside where they were arguing about something inconsequential. And Adelaide felt a wave of contentment so powerful it almost brought tears to her eyes. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, his arm around her waist. "About how different my life is from what I thought it would be," Adelaide said. 10 years ago, I thought my life was over when Thomas left me at that altar. I thought I had lost my one chance at happiness. But really, that moment was when my life began. Everything good I have came from that terrible day." "I have thought about that sometimes," Samuel admitted. "About how one person's cruelty led to our happiness. It does not seem quite right that something so hurtful had such a good outcome." "Life is strange that way," Adelaide said. "But I am grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me here to you, to our family, to this life we built. I would not change a single thing." Samuel pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Neither would I." "Well, maybe I would have found you sooner, had more years with you. But I will take every day we get and count myself blessed." Marcus went off to college, and the house felt emptier without him, though he came home for summers and holidays full of new ideas and enthusiasm. Catherine threw herself into her studies, determined to get into veterinary school despite the obstacles women faced in that field. Peter, their ranch hand, had proven himself invaluable over the years, and Samuel made him a partner in the operation, giving him a stake in the ranch's success. Adelaide's parents aged gracefully, her father proud of what Adelaide and Samuel had built, her mother delighted with her grandchildren. Adelaide's sisters both married and had children of their own, and family gatherings were loud, chaotic, joy-filled affairs. On a cool spring evening 20 years after their wedding, Adelaide and Samuel celebrated their anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. The children were both away, Marcus working on a ranch in Montana for the summer, and Catherine studying in Boise. It was just the two of them, the way it had been in the beginning. 20 years, Adelaide marveled, looking at her husband across the table. His hair was graying at the temples now, and he had lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to her, he was as handsome as the day he had walked into her father's store and told her that Thomas's loss was his blessing. 20 years, Samuel repeated. And I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. I did not think that was possible, but I do. Every year with you just makes me love you more. I feel the same way, Adelaide said softly. You have given me everything I ever wanted and so much more I did not even know to want. You have been my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. They cleaned up the dinner dishes together, moving around each other in the easy synchronization of 2 decades of partnership. Later, lying in bed with Adelaide's head on his shoulder, Samuel spoke into the darkness. I have been thinking, he said. Marcus wants to take over the ranch eventually, we know that. And Catherine is going to be a veterinarian. She will make us proud doing that. But I am 46 years old, Adelaide. You are 42. We have worked hard for 20 years. Maybe it is time to think about what we want to do with the next 20 years. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that maybe we start thinking about traveling like you always wanted to do. Not giving up the ranch. Marcus will run it fine with Peter. But taking time to see some of the country. Maybe go to San Francisco, see the ocean. Visit your cousin in St. Louis. Go to Chicago and see the tall buildings. We could afford it now and we have earned it. What do you think? Adelaide felt excitement flutter in her chest. I think that sounds wonderful. I would love to travel with you, see new places, have adventures. We have spent 20 years building our life here. Maybe it is time to enjoy it a bit. So they began to plan, poring over maps and train schedules, deciding where they wanted to go first. They took their first trip that summer, 2 weeks in San Francisco that opened both their eyes to how big and varied the world was. They walked on the beach, Adelaide touching ocean water for the first time. They rode cable cars and ate in restaurants and explored the city hand in hand like young sweethearts. More trips followed over the next few years. Chicago, Denver, St. Louis. Each one an adventure, each one bringing them closer together. They were still partners in the ranch and the store, still worked hard when they were home. But now they also played, enjoyed life, made memories beyond the daily grind of work. Marcus married a woman he met in Boise, brought her home to the ranch, and soon Adelaide and Samuel were grandparents to a beautiful baby boy named Samuel Marcus Vance. Catherine achieved her dream and became one of the first female veterinarians in Idaho, setting up practice in Twin Falls where she was much in demand. She married later than her brother, at 30, to a doctor she met through her work, and eventually gave Adelaide and Samuel 2 more grandchildren. As Adelaide and Samuel entered their 50s, they began to slow down, letting Marcus take over more of the ranch operations, hiring someone to manage the store most days. They spent more time with their grandchildren, teaching them to ride and read and think for themselves. They took long walks in the evenings, still talking for hours the way they had when they were courting. One evening, they were back at their spot by the river, the bench they had sat on so many times worn smooth by decades of use. Adelaide was 60 now, her auburn hair silver, her face lined but still beautiful to Samuel's eyes. He was 64, his body showing the wear of a life of hard work, but his eyes still lit up when he looked at his wife. "You remember the first time we sat here?" Adelaide asked. "You told me you wanted 50 years of Sunday dinners and evening talks." "I remember," Samuel said, "and I meant every word." "We are more than halfway there," Adelaide said softly. 41 years married, I think we will make it to 50 and beyond." "I am counting on it," Samuel said. "Though I have to say, those first 50 years together have been even better than I imagined. And I imagined pretty well." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. "His loss truly was your blessing, you know, and mine. Because losing Thomas led me to you, and you led me to this life. I could not have imagined all this back then, standing at that altar feeling like my life was ending. But it was just beginning. The best parts of my life all started that day." "I think about that sometimes," Samuel admitted. "About standing in that church watching you hurt, and how angry I was at Thomas for doing that to you. But also how grateful I was for the chance to tell you how I felt. I had been watching you for months, Adelaide, wanting you but thinking I did not have a right because you were spoken for. When he did not show up, it felt wrong to be happy about it because you were in pain. But I also could not help thinking that maybe, just maybe, this was my chance. And I knew I had to take it because I might never get another one." "I am glad you did," Adelaide said. "I am glad you had the courage to speak up, to tell me I deserved better, to give me a chance to know you. You saved me, Samuel. Not from being alone, I could have handled that. But from settling, from living a half-life with someone who did not truly value me. You showed me what real love looks like." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The river flowed past them the way it had for decades, constant and unchanging even as their lives had transformed around it. "We should probably head home," Samuel said eventually. "It will be dark soon." "A few more minutes," Adelaide said. "I just want to sit here with you a while longer, remember how lucky we are." "I remember that every day," Samuel said, pulling her closer. "Every single day, Adelaide. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They made it to their 50th anniversary, a huge celebration that their children organized with the whole town invited. It was held at the ranch, now run entirely by Marcus, but still called the Vance Ranch, still home. Adelaide and Samuel renewed their vows before Reverend Thompson's successor, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, by friends and neighbors, and the community they had been part of for over half a century. Adelaide wore a dress in pale gold that Catherine had helped her pick out, and Samuel wore his best suit with a gold watch chain that had been his father's. They spoke the same vows they had spoken 50 years earlier, and they meant them even more deeply now, tested and proven by decades of partnership. At the reception, people gave toasts and told stories. Marcus talked about growing up watching his parents work side by side, learning what a true partnership looked like. Catherine spoke about her mother's strength and her father's gentleness, about how they had supported her dreams even when they were unconventional. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren shared funny memories and sweet moments. When it was Samuel's turn to speak, he stood and pulled Adelaide to her feet beside him, holding her hand tightly. "Most of you know the story of how Adelaide and I met," he said, his voice still strong even at 74. "How she was left at the altar by a man who was not worthy of her, and how I was lucky enough to be there to tell her that his loss was my blessing. I have lived every day of the past 50 years proving that I meant those words. Adelaide, you have been my wife, my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, and the love of my life. You made me a better man than I ever would have been without you. You built this life with me, worked beside me through good times and hard times, never wavered in your love and support. I am the luckiest man who ever lived because you chose me. I love you today more than ever, and I will love you every day that remains to us." There was not a dry eye in the crowd, and Adelaide was crying openly as she stood on tiptoe to kiss her husband, not caring that everyone was watching, wanting the whole world to see how much she loved this man. The party went on into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. Adelaide and Samuel danced together under the stars, moving slowly to a waltz the way they had at their wedding, at countless dances over the decades, their bodies knowing each other so well that they moved as one. 50 years, Adelaide said softly, and every one of them a blessing. 50 years, Samuel agreed, and if I am lucky, 50 more. They both knew that was unlikely. They were in their 70s now, and while they were healthy for their age, they understood that time was precious. But they had lived fully, loved deeply, built a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. They had children who loved and respected them, grandchildren who adored them, a community they had been part of for their entire adult lives. Samuel died peacefully in his sleep at 80, with Adelaide beside him the way she had been for 56 years. His last words to her, spoken the evening before, were the same words he had said nearly every night of their marriage. "I love you, Adelaide. You are my greatest blessing." Adelaide lived another 5 years, surrounded by family, still sharp and engaged with life even as her body grew frail. She spent her last years telling stories to her great-grandchildren, making sure they knew where they came from, what their grandparents had built, how a moment of pain had led to a lifetime of joy. On a warm spring afternoon, very much like the one when she had first walked by the river with Samuel, Adelaide asked Catherine to take her to their spot. They sat on the bench together, Catherine holding her mother's hand, both of them looking at the water. "I want you to know something," Adelaide said, her voice thin but clear. "My life was not perfect. It was hard sometimes, full of challenges and struggles, but it was also full of love and joy and meaning. When Thomas Whitfield left me at that altar, I thought my life was over. But really, it was just beginning. Everything good came after that moment. Your father, you and Marcus, the ranch, the store, all of it. So if you take one thing from my life, let it be this. Sometimes what looks like the worst thing that could happen is actually the beginning of the best things. Do not be afraid when life does not go the way you planned. Trust that something better is waiting if you are brave enough to reach for it." Catherine was crying, but she nodded. "I will remember, Mama. I promise." Adelaide died that night, peacefully in her sleep just as Samuel had, her last thought a memory of a young cowboy with gray eyes telling her that another man's loss was his blessing, and her thinking that it was her blessing too. They were buried side by side in the Twin Falls Cemetery, under a shared headstone that read, "Samuel and Adelaide Vance. His loss was their blessing, together forever." And in death as in life, they were partners. Their love story finished but not forgotten, passed down through generations as proof that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best lives, and that true love, when you find it, is worth every risk and every moment of courage it takes to embrace it.